Hello friends and welcome back. This video is titled That's Why Baboons Steal Puppies. And here goes. A group of farmers in Eastern Africa was always wondering who kept stealing their puppies. So one night, they set up a trap to find out who the culprits were. They waited throughout the night until they realized that the thieves weren't people. While they were looking at the figures who kept stealing their puppies, they realized that these were no regular thieves. One of the local farmers shouted, "Run! The ones stealing our puppies are actually baboons." We can't imagine what it's like living as a baboon, but we might have an idea that they are a bit similar to monkeys. After all, baboons are of the same species, and scientists have claimed that baboons are just very large monkeys. Although, what makes them unique? Throughout the world, countless baboons are spread out, and they have been wandering in troops. No baboon can travel independently, and you won't see a single baboon exploring without their families. This is unheard of, especially in Eastern Africa. The baboons who have kept on stealing puppies were local to Eastern Africa, and they have been in the area for years and years. They were locals there, as were the people they had been coexisting with. It has been relatively peaceful, and the locals didn't mind the troops of baboons in the area. Eastern Africa is a region that's lush in greeneries and countless exotic animals. It's one of the richest parts of the world in terms of natural beauty. Although did baboons always live in the mountains? Back then, you could only ever see baboons if you explored the furthest depths of the mountains. They had never gone to cities filled with humans, as they were a bit scared that the locals were predators. This was a bit ironic, considering that baboons could be aggressive. Although, these animals have traveled from mountains to places near human cities. They started to live with the locals in Eastern Africa, and they seemed to like cohabiting with these people. However, this wasn't easy, and humans began to feel the aggressiveness of these baboons. Once the baboons started to cohabit spaces and cities with humans in them, they adapted. Scientists have proven that baboons are some of the smartest animals out there, and this isn't hard to figure out why. These animals adapt quite well, and easily at that. Before we continue, if you like this video, please like, comment, or subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate it. Now back to the video. They started adopting human customs and habits. It was quite freaky at one point. Not only did humans find baboons weird, but they began to get aggressive. This was especially so when it came to hunting for their own food. As the years passed, more and more troops of baboons went closer to civilization. They were done living in small towns with the locals. They wanted to expand and explore newer horizons. This was why they started going into bigger cities. Naturally, there were repercussions to this baboon migration. After all, most cities in Eastern Africa weren't prepared for this. So they had no choice but to welcome these animals, albeit their aggressive nature. In most cities in the region, baboons have become an unlikely tourist attraction. There had been so many of these animals that they started lingering around the towns. Tourists have started taking their photos and sharing them all over social media. Most of the locals in these cities don't know whether this is a good thing or not. Although, the tourists didn't seem to mind as long as the baboons left them and their possessions alone. This wasn't the case most of the time, though. As we've previously mentioned, baboons don't come one by one. They always come in groups, or as what they call troops. Normally, these troops consisted of 60 to 80 baboons, which is a large number considering that more than one troop lived in most of these areas. These troops always have their councils, consisting of 3 to 4 of their most respected males. Like most groups in the animal kingdom, baboons like to follow their leaders. This was why they never travel alone, especially when hunting and foraging their next meal. Most of us know that baboons could be a tad bit aggressive, and this is especially true if they don't have their way. Some tourists in Eastern Africa have experienced the rage of these animals, especially when these baboons want their food or gadgets. The police force in this region has advised tourists that they should give these animals whatever they want so they won't get hurt. That's how dangerous these baboons could be. Plus, they have a very distinct sound that's both creepy and annoying. One of the most favorite playgrounds of these baboons is the city dumps. This is where they usually hang out, especially when trying to look for their food. We think that it's the perfect spot, and they also could get things that they never knew they wanted. However, the presence of the baboons in city dumps would sometimes cause major problems. This was a thing, especially when city workers tried to tidy up the dump or recycle. Their work had to wait until these baboons left again. Like most groups in the animal kingdom, baboons also have their main rivals. For these animals, their rivals are none other than the hungry hyenas. Whenever these two groups would face each other, it's sure that chaos would soon ensue. Hyenas are not only scary, but they're one of the most vicious predators in the animal kingdom. These wild dogs can tear a person from limb to limb, but baboons are not scared of them. If you ever see a group of hyenas and baboons, it's best to run away from it all. There are times when hyenas and baboons would face each other in their favorite spot, the city dumps. Generally, this would somehow be the survival of the fittest, as both parties hate accepting defeat, especially not towards their main rivals. Sometimes they would also encounter each other in most places in the city. Once this happens, they know that it will only end badly. It's never a pretty sight, and most locals in Eastern Africa know better than to meddle with these wild creatures. Whenever a troop of baboons would encounter a clan of hyenas, people in the area know better than to stop and stare. These are some of the wildest and most ferocious creatures in Eastern Africa, and a fight between these groups isn't something that you would want to witness. While troops of baboons were strong, they were no match to these feisty hyenas. This was why they would always go home hungry when hyenas were feasting in the city dump. Well, all this would change when baboons started to realize something. One day, a group of baboons noticed that humans would often carry dogs with them. As we all know, we like to keep dogs as pets, and they make our lives so much happier and easier. This was a foreign concept to baboons, but they learned the ropes pretty quickly. So some of these animals started stealing dogs, but the dogs they stole would just run back home. They kept on going back to their owners. These baboons couldn't figure out what they were doing wrong. It wasn't until they realized that they were stealing the wrong dogs. The baboons realized what their mistake was. They were always stealing adult dogs. They soon understood that if they wanted these dogs to stay, they had to steal them from their owners at a very early age. So that's what they did. While humans liked keeping dogs as pets, these baboons had a different use for these puppies. They had a plan, and the troops of baboons were so sure that it was going to work. After all, if humans could do it, so could they. But what was the reason for all the stolen puppies? In the city, locals would soon realize that most of the puppies in the area were missing. They had no idea who the culprits might be, and they were scared that these thieves would go for their adult dogs next. So they set up a plan to catch the mystery thieves. The locals set up a trap one night and watched as the mystery figures stole more puppies. Then they realized that these weren't people at all, they were baboons. They had no idea why these animals were doing it, but they were keen to find out. The troops of baboons had an idea that they could train these stolen puppies as their guard dogs. If they couldn't win against their main rivals, at least they could protect themselves from the hyenas. It was an ingenious idea, but the locals weren't sure if this was something that was going to work. Baboons would train these puppies throughout the day, and the puppies loved them in return. These puppies became loyal to these baboons, and they treated them as they were their friends. Then the moment came for these puppies to defend the baboons from the hyenas. Would they succeed? The baboons watched as these puppies barked and barked at the clan of hyenas. They wanted these ferocious wild dogs to leave, and they didn't stop until they had succeeded. In the end, the baboons got what they wanted, and they had the city dumps to themselves whenever they pleased. To some people, this seemed like using the dog for the baboons' main benefit. However, it was a smart idea that worked successfully. The baboons knew it too. Although, they didn't treat these puppies as their family, which was pretty sad. To these baboons, these dogs were simply their workers and not someone that they treated as their family. It was pretty sad, but baboons had a mentality that they were so much above these other animals. It was quite a tragic view, but it had worked for them. For years, these dogs have been their main helpers, and they have defended the baboons from the hyenas. Even though they weren't considered family, the dogs remained loyal to the troops of baboons who had stolen them from their real owners. If this was tragic or not, this is something that you would have to decide for yourselves. Even though these dogs weren't treated like family, some of the baboons still treated them as their best friend. After all, dogs had always had that reputation, and this was something that they took pride in. So they were quite happy with that. In the end, these baboons had an idea that worked so well in their favor. Stealing puppies from the local city in Eastern Africa seemed like an unlikely plan, but it had worked. What do you think of this story, and do you think the baboons did the right thing? That's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. As always, if you like this video, please like, comment, or subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.